May I have your attention, please? Good evening.
You're listening to Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. We thank you for tuning in and hope you enjoy another exciting episode of our show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. 86 degrees here up in the great state of New Jersey. But as always, from NJ to NC, I'm in the studio with my right-hand man, Mark Lee. So, Mark, tell me what's good in your neck of the woods, my brother.
Well, you just said part of what's good. It's hot, and it's hot all over. It's hot all over the country, I believe, but it is definitely hot here as well. There is no doubt in the world that hot is the key word. Hot, pandemic. We got a couple of other keywords that are going on. Definitely, folks trying to get economic empowerment in these economic hard times. So we can put economy as one of the keywords, and we can also probably put a lot of other things as keywords as well. Because, a lot of things have been happening in society. Even in the pandemic, you got to go take care of yourself as well. So I went to go see my barber earlier today because, he does not have to do the clandestine cuts. He can actually do official cuts since we're in the right stage for him to do that. So I went to go see the barber and check him out and got a little bit of a trim job going and everything. Still got the beard going, but, at least I'm done looking like the runaway man or the runaway Santa Claus or the man under the bridge or any of those kind of things that you do not want to be seen as. And then, we got folks doing new things in society. I understand that the Redskins have finally decided that they are not going to be the Redskins. Apparently they have talked to their native brothers and everybody else, and they're going to come up with a new name and a new logo. So as my friend Stella said on my other show this afternoon, that was 40 years in the making, should have been many years ago, but they finally got around to, giving justice to the native society and not doing having that name out there. So I don't know about you, but I will be glad to see that. And, I have no problem with some of the monuments going down, those symbols of hatred and things of that nature. And, we talk about what we went through, but, I've been reading this book. I don't know if you ever checked this book out, but it's called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. And that book is no joke. It talks about what the natives went through. And, we talk about the okie doke, the Black Lives Matter people getting, the Hispanics are getting, and a lot of other folks have been getting over the several, we'll say over the decades or so. But, there was a serious okie doke that the natives went through because, like I said, they were promised all kinds of things and treaties were broken, things, backstabbers to get that OJ song going. There was definitely some serious backstabbing going on. Promised one thing and you get stabbed in the back. So, I've only got maybe through about 40 or 50 pages of the book. And as you can see, just in the 40 or 50 pages of the book, I'm already pissed. And I ain't even got to the end of the book. So it just feels...
You're not even at the middle yet.
I'm not even at the middle. Because even some of the things that we talk about in society is actually stuff that even was going on back then. We talk about, folks claiming to be one thing and then being another. And, one of the things that we've oftentimes heard people talk about, even on our show, is the Electoral College and things of that nature. Now, I claim that I was a decent student in college. I don't claim that I was like a superstar. I won't know, Dean's List or nothing like that. But, I was at least a decent student. I call myself a BC student, something like that. But I do not remember this lesson that I learned just in this book. It might have been in the book, but I don't remember it. But apparently, Abraham Lincoln didn't even win the majority vote. Apparently, he only had 40% of the vote. Now, given there might have been 5 contestants running, and they might have split the other 60%, but apparently, he only had 40% of the vote, and that was our first president.
Wow.
One of our first was.
You figure, George Washington was the first. Abraham Lincoln,
right, George Washington first.
I don't know what number he was, but it was around the 1860s, so about 100 years later, something like that. Even still, he did not get the majority of the votes.
He did not get the majority of the vote.
Which means, the Electoral College, now what they did say was the Supreme Court said that the Electoral College would have to if the public in their state goes with this candidate, then the electoral votes should go to that candidate as well. So you don't have another one of those situations like we've seen more than once. Most recently with last election, you know what I mean, with an individual who lost the popular vote by 3 million votes.
Right.
But won enough electoral votes to become the president of the United States. And now he's kicked Dr. Fauci to the curb. He's saying that, you know, everything that Dr. Fauci has said, there's not enough truth to it. But I don't mean any harm and no disrespect. I would take his word over there, and I hope they listening, because you know what? The person we got at 1600, has he told us the truth yet about anything? I'm just curious.
I'm trying to figure out the truth that he's told. I mean, he went down there to the, to Mount Rushmore, told a bunch of lies, tried to declare a cultural war. And I remember that term being used in a whole different context, even during the civil rights and everything. But he tried to declare a cultural war and tried to do a lot of other different kind of things. So I'm trying to think. I know he tells several lies a day. We do know that for a fact. He tells several lies a day. And then I also learned recently on the other show and everything, another fact that I did not know, and this was not from the book, but this is from Sister Stella telling me this, Stella Adams, who's a long-time fair housing person and civil rights person. Well, one of the facts I had heard, and you probably heard it as well, which is that 30% of our folks are going to be having mortgage crises in this year. So they're saying 30% of folks will not be able to make their mortgage in the year of 2020. That's one of the impacts that they're saying is going to happen. But what I did not know that she brought up and everything was that this is the first year ever, 2020, that apparently they just now getting around this year. You heard me say it, 2020, to putting an anti-lynching bill in the legislature. There had been no anti-lynching bill. All them lynchings we went through, all them folks that lost their lives, both to the police as well as racist groups and everything else, we've apparently never had an anti-lynching bill till now.
Well, it doesn't surprise me because I know in the state of South Carolina, there was a law that 3 or more people, say you, me, and somebody else, say one of our friends gets assaulted, and then the 3 of us decide to go ahead and pay that aggression back. The 3 of us could get charged with lynching, quote unquote, because it's 3 or more. The same way some of the terminology in a lot of other states say 3 or more people with a common purpose to perform a criminal act is considered a gang. You know, so it's a whole lot of weird terminology and things that should have been outlawed a long time ago that they still are taking their time with. Why? Not sure. Maybe it's just not that important, but I'm still curious as to whether we are considered 5/5 of a person yet, or are we still, in essence, still considered 3/5 of a person? Because it seems like every 20 years they got to go and re-up the Voting Rights Act. So
yep, they got to re-up the Voting Rights Act, which makes no sense. And you're right. There's so many stupid laws out there. I mean, there's certain activities that because the way that society was created and the way society is, there's certain activities even that you might do in the comforts of your own home with your significant other and your wife that are still in many states, in many places, against the law. And if they wanted to, I guess they could walk in there and arrest you for certain things that you might decide to do. But that's actually what you're doing in your household. So I don't think they got any business in your household. But apparently in certain places, and I'm thinking in many places, they could actually do whatever they want to because they still are those laws on the books.
Well, here's the thing. You got to get me to admit to it first.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's no way in hell you're going to ring my doorbell. I'm going to open the door. You're going to ask me first. You'll probably mess up because you're going to come out the gate and say, you know what? These certain things are illegal. Do you do it? Nah, man, that's not me. You got the wrong house. Go next door. You know what I'm saying? Go bother somebody over there. Because as soon as who's going to admit to it?
Exactly. Who's going to admit to it? And by the way, I did check it out. Like I said, I know that he was an early president, but I just checked it out. Abraham Lincoln was our 16th president. He was the first Republican president. And as my friend Stella said on the other show, he's probably back when the Republicans were really a party of socially conscious and things of that nature. And his victory, would, according to what this Wikipedia says, was entirely due to his support in the North and the West. No ballots were cast for him in 10 of the 15 southern slave states, and he only won 2 of the 996 counties in all of the southern states.
Wow. So in his case, the Electoral College worked out well for him because if you go by those numbers, hey, man, you're in the wrong place. Are you here to drop off some packages or something? Because, you know, I don't know if you should be going into the Oval Office, Jack. I don't even know what you're doing in there. Like, sir, you can't go in there. I'm the president. Nah, no, you're not. You know, so it's weird.
Exactly. It's just crazy. I know we got guests at the door, and I want to get to our guests so we can talk to them and see what they're all about it and everything. But I do have to ask you this really quick question. I was watching ESPN, and he was saying, one of their anchors was saying that he really wishes that we would stop this symbolic action. You know, people put stuff on the back of their jerseys. They're wearing Black Lives Matter shirts. They're doing all of this. That's fine and dandy. That is wonderful. But instead of doing these symbolic actions, he would like a plan of action. Like, and we talked about that on this show before. Like coming up with a plan of action, some things that'll be concrete action plans. He was actually even saying that maybe they get 25 or 30, and I always forget Steve's last name. Is it Steven Jackson, the ESPN anchor? But he was saying maybe get 15, 20, 25 of the NBA athletes or the NFL athletes that are making these millions of dollars. We could say the same thing about the entertainers that are making these millions of dollars. They ain't even got to drop, you know, a lot of the money. Just, you know, chop off 100,000. You get 2,500,000. That's, you know, what does that come up to? Like I think 2.5 million. There's a lot of damage you can do with $2.5 million.
Here's the thing, though. You have to have a plan past just give me some money, because you know what? The questions are, what are you going to do with the money? Where is it going to go? Who's going to be in charge of it? And how are you going to spend it towards actually making change? You know, you can try to press all of the superstars and athletes and all of that, but it takes all of us, man. It takes the person with $5. It takes the person with $500 million. You know, at some point, we have to figure out a plan of action, which includes those that don't look like us, that are tired of the same thing. We can't just put it on our back and then bust out with an S on our chest and say, no, we got this. We tried. We've been trying that since April 5th, 1968, and we still have a whole lot of progress that needs to be made. There are grassroots efforts going on now that things are changing, you know, where even just putting the press on organizations. Look at what happened to the Washington Redskins. Dan Snyder said, I will never change the name of that team. You could put it in all caps. Fast forward to now, it's like, yo, we getting rid of the logo. We getting rid of the name, because now the money on the end of the companies like FedEx, who own the field and everything, they're starting to pull those dollars away. If you don't change his name, you don't get this money. Simple concept. So now we fast forward that into how do we get the ear of our legislators to start putting those laws on the books that for those law enforcement officers that choose to do otherwise, that they should be severely punished for it. And I speak as a law enforcement professional. I don't feel bad for them if they don't get a pension. It's better ways to handle situations. All it takes is a little time and a little common sense. But when you don't have that and you allow pride to make you stupid, you make certain decisions that not only affect you, but it's a trickle-down effect. It affects everybody. So should you be punished? Yes, you should. Should they change the names? Yeah, but let's get to the meat and potatoes of it, because right now, all the symbolic gestures, putting those names on jerseys and all of that stuff, it's just like giving a child a piece of candy. A child is crying, you give them a piece of candy, they shut up. We're not kids. We're adults. Some of us do have children, but, you know, at the same time, you can't give me a piece of candy and think that I'm going to be satisfied with that. No, we want more. The generations are different. And no disrespect to the older generation because they fought their asses off to get where we are now. But now we got to push it a little more. We got to take the baton from them because they're much older now. You know, their next step is to become ancestors. What are we going to do to push forward, to push that resistance out of here? So we have to do more than just the symbolic gestures, but we got a plan. We have to come up with a plan. If we don't, all we're doing is making noise, bruh.
Yep, I agree with you. And I think that's what Mr. Barkley was saying as well, even on the issues of police and prison reform. He was saying, come up with a plan. You know, he's agreeing with you that there are some officers that are bad officers, and we need to get rid of those bad apples, but come up with a plan as to how you're going to do it and a plan for how you're going to deal with these situations when they occur if the bad apples are doing things like killing some of our brothers and sisters. But we got to have a plan. We got to have a master plan in order to make these things happen. Can't just go with the symbolic gestures and things of that nature. Now, the other shout out that I've got to give, and then we're going to get to our guest, is, and I'm going to switch the gears a little bit, but, you know, I am a sports fan. I do follow my team, and, you know, there is a tournament going on, the TBT tournament, for the second year in a row. And hopefully this time we're bringing $1 million because it is a winner-take-all prize. But for the second year in a row, and speaking of folks that changed their names, my Golden Eagles, that's the Marquette team, they were the Warriors when I was there. Then they became the Golden Eagles. But the alumni, and all of these teams have ringers, so not saying everybody on the team is from Marquette, but they are the Golden Eagle alumni team, and the majority of the team is alumni, including the coach, Joe Chapman, and we got Travis Diener and Dwight Bikes and DJO and a couple of others that definitely did play for the team. They, tomorrow, will be playing for the championship, going for the $1 million. Did not get the $1 million last year. Hopefully this year we get the $1 million. You know, it's a fan-based support, kind of like all-star league and everything. There was a team from overseas that won some stupid amount of times, like 4 or 5 times overseas elite. They got bumped out by the Cinderella, who is the team we're playing, Sideline Cancer. So we're going to see if we can't, Carmen Crew, which beat us last year, got eliminated. So we're going to see if we can't bring the prize. And yours truly will get a little bit of money because that's what it is. It's a fan-based kind of thing. And, you know, if I win or if they win, because I ain't doing jack, I ain't shooting the hoop of one. But if they win, I'll get like an extra $88 in my bank account. And I don't know about you, but I can use the extra $88. So, you know, I will be rooting very hard for that team to do something tomorrow. So, like I said, tomorrow, I think tomorrow evening, they're going for that prize, and I will be rooting real hard for them to beat them Sideline Cancer Cats.
I hear that, man. I hear that. We got 3. We got 3 at the door, right? We're going to start with the first one, but I'm going to throw this ad in there real quick. And it's Straight Talk with Dean and Mark, y'all.
This is Nikki Hall, founder of Simply Radiant LLC, a woman with great passion and skill to make you look and feel better. Meet me where you are. Let's take it to another level, a new you. See you soon. Call 919-971-6243. Make your place today.
Okay, we're going to get into the conversation now. Kanan, welcome to Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. You're now on the line. Tell us where you're calling from.
It's Kenan. I'm in Palo Alto, California, where it's hot, but not as hot as it is where you are.
I hear you. How are you doing? Yes, you've got a lot of things going on. You are a great entrepreneur and things of that nature. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got going on because, like I said, we talked briefly, and you just got some amazing things going on. But it might not be hot where y'all are, but y'all have dealt with, like, forest fires and other things out there in California because I got friends in California, and they told me that when COVID came that it might have put some relief on those, but I don't know. Have they started back up, or are they still going on, or did Mother Nature decide to take a respite from that whole, that whole forest fire kind of thing that was going on there for a minute?
We'll just say we haven't had them yet, but it's funny. I don't know about you, but there have been so many things coming so fast and furious at us that I forget catastrophes that happened just last year. So, yes, there have been some terrible forest fires out here. And when they're bad, they're so bad that going outside, everyone gets sick because there's so many different heavy metals and all kinds of things in the air. Everything that was alive that the fire went through is vaporized. So yeah, the fires were pretty bad out here, and I wouldn't say that we're set up for not having them again this season.
Gotcha. And how are you coping with the COVID? Because I do know that Los Angeles and California was hit. So how is it impacting your business? You are an entrepreneur, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs are just having way too much fun with Zoom meetings now. I think that I've heard several of my friends that are entrepreneurs saying that they are about zoomed out because every time they turn around, they're being called to another meeting, and it's a Zoom meeting, whereas in the old days, and in the old days weren't that long ago, they would actually jump in a plane and travel to some of these places and actually get to enjoy the culture. And the culture might be as simple as going from Los Angeles to New York or Los Angeles to Miami. But right now, when they see their New York brothers and their Miami sisters or whoever they might be else visiting, it's seeing them, unfortunately, on the big Zoom screen. So how are you coping as an entrepreneur and dealing with COVID? And also tell a little bit about your business and your projects and what you're working on.
Yeah, that sounds like a new buzz line, is too much fun with Zoom. Yeah, not. But it's interesting. I was just talking with somebody at noon today, a dear friend that I hadn't talked to in a few years, and he was saying that he is, in fact, exactly what you said. He's missing flying around from place to place and the different cultures, et cetera. So my entrepreneurship is in the world of social entrepreneurship. I'm a chemist. I've been a faculty member, a research scientist. I've worked at several national labs, but my real passion at this point in time, this sort of arc of where my life is Reimagine Science, which is a nonprofit that I am the principal founder of. And we've been around, I'm quite proud to say, actually, we've been around since 2008 was our incorporation. And the reason I say I'm proud to say it is I've just noticed a lot of other entrepreneurial, nonprofit, social impact entities. It's hard to persist. So we've outlived several that started around the same time that we started, and having that persistence is something. I'm pretty proud of it, actually. Our purpose is everything about science, and in fact, I think one thing that I would love to see is that we get rid of the word science and that everybody considers themselves a scientist. It's so not noteworthy that they don't even know to call it that. And to reframe science as just our curiosity as an organism, that we are curious about things and that we want to understand how they work. And then the other thing I say about science is it's our antenna. It's how we understand what's going on out in the world and in the universe. So it's a really great checking in with reality mechanism, and we need that. We need that for course correction and finding out what impacts are, and just the awe and wonder of it. So Reimagine Science is what I do. Because we're a virtual organization, we're incorporated in Washington, D.C., and now out in California as well. We've always worked virtually. In fact, my first Zoom meeting was 4 or 5 years ago. And I had worked with somebody 3 or 4 years and didn't even have a clue what they looked like, and he was one of my most productive partners. So the virtuality of it hasn't slowed my work down at all. But it does slow me down if you want to talk about grocery shopping. I am so sick of washing groceries. So I'm sort of the emissary that goes to the outside world. We do try to stay sheltered in place. We had a really, it was dramatic. When the shelter-in-place order came through, my partner and I were actually up in Oregon at a workshop with Joanna Macy's work, and we came home a little early because the person that we had picked up in Mount Shasta to take to the workshop, who led it, Molly Brown, she knew the shelter-in-place was coming down, and she was really worried about crossing the state line. So we kind of headed back to California in the nick of time, and I had my own workshop retreat that I was doing the very next weekend, and we converted in a very short space of time to a virtual event, which went really well. So that's how I am in virtual space right now. I'm just busy. I'm in my office. I'm sort of like the two of you are, working remotely and getting it done.
Yep, definitely getting it done, definitely trying to do things on a regular basis, even in the virtual world. A friend of mine actually did a festival virtually, because that festival usually would be outside and would be celebrating nature and environmental progress and the sustainability of nature. And then that festival, which usually is outside in a river area, here in Durham had to be converted virtually. So I actually recorded my part about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then the actual live version was not this past Friday, but the Friday before. So like I said, they had to do some quick pivots as people are finding out that they've got to do pivots on a regular basis. I want to bring in the other guests very shortly, but before I get to them, I was wondering, do you think, because you brought up the fact of science, and I agree with you that we need to have science more seriously, but do you think we're doing a good enough job of teaching science in our school system? Because that's one of the things that I feel that we don't explore enough of is creativity and the sciences. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Because I know even with myself, I'm not going to lie, I thought about a science field. I wound up going into journalism, event planning, and a lot of stuff around the arts and around media. I thought about going into science. I thought about it one time. I was going to be either a meteorologist, and I think I might have explored the idea of veterinarian science and everything. But then I discovered that at some point you've got to cut up things and get blood and see blood. I didn't think that I realized until later, as a much later adult, that you might not necessarily have to do that with the earth sciences like meteorology. But I think at some point I just associated science with blood, and me and blood were not good friends. So that's why I veered away from science. But I did think about it as a youth.
How cool.
And then
Now, how cool that you were thinking of meteorology and veterinary work. And, I have a probably pretty radically different opinion on this than a lot of people in science. And you're pointing to why. I think the way we currently teach science in a one-size-fits-all, the thing it does best is it differentiates people so they either define themselves as scientists or not that. In fact, it's amazing how many people I've met over the years, because I used to regularly ask the taxi cab driver or the guy at the gas station or wherever what their relationship with science was. And it's remarkable how many people have a relationship with science, love or hate, right? So a lot of the science coursework helps you define that you're not that. And I will go even further with your reticence for dissection. Yeah, why would that be married? It is different now. A lot of schools have gotten away from that probably about 2 decades ago. But why would that be a prerequisite for being able to define yourself as a scientist, that you have to be able to be dispassionate and treat other organisms in a way that is so separate from you, and that you're sort of the uninvolved observer? But not only that, the whole thing about pre-med and having the screener classes of organic chemistry, and there's so many things that we do in science that I think you could almost call it somewhat brutal, and it's the opposite of wonder and awe, which is where I think science really should reside. And I'll say, just to finish up, that I have a dear friend, Elizabeth Miller, and her partner, her co-founder, Matt. They teach science through poetry, and they do so well. They've been doing it for many years here in the Bay Area, Oakland schools, and now more in Marin County as well. They find that the students are much better in both literacy and numeracy, because the way that they think through metaphor, the way they ask more critical questions through poetry of all things. I'm a huge fan of that. I'm a huge fan.
Yep, I agree with you. I do think that science can be used to teach things of that nature. I know that one of the greatest things that I think my dad did, because I have no kids of my own, but I have 2 nephews, and they are now about to be 11 and 12 next month in August. But when they were youngsters, I mean like baby youngsters, my dad, who has got some science background, his dad, my granddad, was a biology professor at Central, and it is actually the biology building at North Carolina Central University. The biology building is named after him, and he's always, just dad himself, has had an interest in science, whether that's his love of turtles or whether that's just his love of nature. And he actually went and actually showed these youngsters, these toddlers, these things about nature even when they were young. Now, a lot of people I know have this philosophy that they believe that, you don't need to tell a baby about things in nature because their brains aren't developed and they won't resonate or they won't pick up what you're telling them. I don't think Dad bought that theory, so he actually was showing them these things, and I think that has helped them in their curiosity even to these days, because I definitely think that both of my nephews are definitely curious beings, and I think part of the reason of their being curious is because both their granddad, my dad, and their dad, my younger brother, definitely encouraged them to start thinking at a very young age. I mean, like they were plainly infants. I don't think they were 1 year old before Dad was showing them things around the community and around the world, pointing out this plant, that bug, this animal, whether it was a rabbit, whether it was a squirrel or whatever, but just showing them the wonders of nature. And I think that even myself, and I'm 58 now, but even myself, I have an affinity for Mother Nature. I actually try to observe Mother Nature. I don't know what your thoughts about this are, and then I definitely want to bring Brandon on the conversation as well as my other guests, but I'm one of those people that believes that animals oftentimes tell us things if we would just bother to listen, because, like I said, the theory that I've shared on this show several times is that I have several friends from New York, as well as my own self being from here and have lived here most of my life. When 9/11 happened, and I know that was some 20 years ago almost, I actually observed that a lot of the animals must have got like a memo from Mother Nature that humans were about to get stupid. Because when I talked to friends of mine in New York and mentioned that I did not see as many squirrels, I didn't see as many birds, I didn't see as many of the critters as were usually out there, they paused for a minute and then they thought about it, and then they would, almost to a person, they'd be like, come to think of it, I didn't see a lot of pigeons if they were in New York, or I didn't see a lot of squirrels if they were in Virginia. So they were almost like agreeing with my thought that a lot of these things that we just give pass into as not being, as like Mother Nature not paying attention to what we're doing, I actually think that they are paying attention. And I know that even when the coronavirus came around, a lot of people have observed as to how Mother Nature is kind of reclaiming some of her territory. Because I know there's the story of the dolphins that have appeared in Italy that had never been seen before, and some of the other animals. And even here, I mean, I live in North Carolina, and I've noticed that even you're not exactly going to get close enough to catch them, but even the rabbits and the birds, I think that they know what's going on. So I've noticed that you can get a little bit closer to them than you might have in the past because, one, they don't see as many of us, and two, I don't know that they're as afraid of us because they see that we're going through some changes of our own. But I know that even here I've seen like a little rabbit that's nearby, and the little rabbit has hopped by and gotten close to me and a couple of friends. And like I said, if you decide you want to try to catch the rabbit might get smart and disappear. But I have noticed that they do allow humans to get a little bit closer, and I do know that there have been reports of even these animals coming into spaces that they used not to be in, whether that's the dolphins in Italy or some of the other animals that people have seen around the world. So just wondering what your take on that is. And then I'm going to bring in, I said I was going to bring in Brandon, and I am going to bring in Brandon, but I'm going to bring in first Paul Wheaton, because Paul Wheaton is all about economic sustainability and environmental sustainability. So, Paul, I don't know how much you heard of what I was talking about in terms of the animals, and we've got Keenan with Reimagined Science. But, Paul, tell a little bit about how you're thinking about the environment and sustainability and things of that nature, because I know a lot of folks are starting to think about these matters even now. So I'm bringing you in first, and then we'll go grab Paul as well. So, Paul, tell a little bit about what you're all about.
I am about trying to come up with a better recipe to reduce our carbon footprint, our petroleum footprint, our toxic footprint. So things that we can do ourselves in our own backyard or in our home, things that will make a large global difference. Because I kind of feel like the recipes we've been given so far are insufficient and frankly really weak. When people talk about trying to solve a big problem, they seem to typically be talking about who to be angry at. And I kind of feel like the monsters that we're concerned about are monsters that we've basically created ourselves, and that the solutions are within our own hands.
That makes a lot of sense, and I do want to bring in Brandy as well. But just to bring you in and everything and to further the conversation, you talk about us and the carbon footprint, but that's one of the things that I do know came about even in the conversation when coronavirus came about, which is a lot of people noticed that because we were sheltered in place all over the world, that the carbon footprint all of a sudden changed a lot. And I know that there have been like these reports of the smog not being as heavy as it used to be where Keenan is in California or in some of these heavily polluted areas, even like around Hong Kong and some of the Asian countries, that because we had the shelter in place and we weren't driving as much and we weren't doing as much of these things, that we wound up seeing the impact that we could have on nature when we're not doing these things. So it seems like we accidentally stumbled into your plan, Paul, because even though coronavirus is what created this to happen, it seems like a lot of what you've been proposing that we do, we wound up doing anyway because of what Mother Nature and science did in this whole disease and this pandemic that we're in the middle of.
I think that there were some really fantastic improvements. And at the same time, people are still dying of cancer, and all the carbon count in the atmosphere is still just as high. So yeah, we got a momentary reprieve, and we're kind of back. We're right back to where we were. It's still getting worse.
Wow. That's a horrible thing that's still getting worse. How did you first get involved? And I'd like to hear from both you and Keenan, and I'm definitely going to bring Brandon into the conversation. But how did you get involved in the works that you're doing? Because like I said, Paul, for example, I'll start with you, Paul, and then I'm going to get to Keenan because Keenan was our first guest. But, Paul, how did you get involved in this work? I mean, you're all the way there in Montana. By the way, I hear Montana is this beautiful country. It's on my wish list. I got wish lists of countries that I want to go to and wish lists of places that I want to go to. And Montana is definitely on my wish list of places just because I hear great things about the way that it's wide open and very wonderful. I was just telling Dean at the beginning of the show that I was reading Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, so there's definitely a rich Native American culture over there in Montana. But how did you get involved in the whole sustainability movement? And how did you, were you born in Montana? Are you a native of Montanian? Or how did you actually get involved in this work?
I was born just over the hill in Idaho, and eventually found myself in Montana, and I love being in Montana. They call it Big Sky Country, and I know it sounds bizarre, but it does. Not only does it seem like the sky really is bigger, but you were just talking about science and scientists, and apparently there are some scientific things that have proven why it seems bigger here, why the sky, because it's got to be the same size. It just has to be. But it does seem bizarre that it does seem bigger. But I got into what I do now through the way I think most people get into this branch of environmentalism, which is through gardening. And it's like I just became bonkers about gardening. And as I experienced more and more things and started to tinker more and more, then kind of came the whole thing where people would talk about like the problems of the world. And I thought, like, for example, one of the things is your energy footprint, which is tied pretty well to your carbon footprint. And it's kind of like, okay, well, what can I do to kind of cut that? And then I just kind of started measuring all the things, and I found some simple things that could dramatically reduce my energy footprint. And then I tried to share my discoveries, only to find that I wasn't reaching too many people with this information. And there were a lot of people that were kind of set in like, no, that's not true. Well, why do you say it's not true? Because it isn't. And it's like, okay, that didn't go very far, did it? And I came up with this well-documented, rich bibliography of information to kind of, help make a powerful recipe book for how to make real, deep change from our own backyards. And so, to answer your question, I got here from gardening.
And gardening is a wonderful way to get there. I've got a good friend who's actually starting to garden. I've even got another friend that's just around the corner from me in the apartment complex, originally from Brazil, and she's starting to garden literally in the little small patch of land that's in front of her apartment building, and she's actually the one that kind of adopted the rabbit. I think I'm just kind of co-fostering the rabbit along with this buddy of mine, because she started throwing carrots and lettuce and other things at the rabbit, so I don't think that the rabbit's trying to go anywhere anytime soon. I think the rabbit realizes that it's discovered its own version of a restaurant, so it'll probably be there as long as she's continuing to feed it at everything. But I do know that she's been doing that, and another friend of mine is doing great gardening, great canning, and definitely enjoying their gardening and canning as well. Definitely want to continue the conversation and want both of you to continue with me, but I do want to bring Brandon in as well so we can see what Brandon's all about, and we may have one or two others that will call in the near future. But after I bring Brandon in, then we'll have all of us, and we'll just go into a wide-ranging conversation. But Brandon, how are you doing? Have you ever been to Montana or California? Because that's where my other two guests are from.
Hey, Mark. I have been up to Montana once. I went up to Red Lodge, over 10 years ago, and man, it was so beautiful up there. And then actually lived in LA for 2 years doing music for TV and film with my brother.
Cool. Definitely tell folks a little bit about your music and about how you've been doing your music and what kind of music you're playing, and just let folks know a little bit more about you and what you're doing, and then we'll just get into a general conversation with everybody covering all these topics, everything from music to science to sustainability. So definitely just give a little bit about your own background and what you've got going on right now.
Thank you so much for letting me join the conversation. It's been so fun to listen to y'all's conversation, and I'm a musician, kind of born and raised in Nashville, as some call it Music City, USA. That can be a debated topic, I'm sure. But it's been fun making music. Grew up in a family of musicians, and just been recently putting solo some songs out under my solo artist name, and I'm kind of a late bloomer. I mean, at least on putting my stuff out. I'm mid-30s, but I'm still just excited to share the music. As that's totally, of course, what music's here to help get us through all sorts of good and bad times, and I grew up with a love for all sorts of music, and real eclectic, worldly, but my style's kind of alternative. So just been really trying to, amidst this quarantine, it's been a interesting kind of a position, I feel like, for all musicians or creatives and just anybody. I think everybody. It's so interesting how we're all in this together, and even I love hearing about the animals. I feel like I've been seeing more animals than I was before the coronavirus hit. But it's been fun putting this music out. I'm itching to get on stage, and perform, and just really excited to get out and tour whenever that can become a considerable option.
Yeah, and when do you think that will be an option? Because I've heard some people saying that they don't know whether we'll ever be able to get out to perform for, definitely I know a lot of people have already written off 2020, and some people, I guess, are even writing off part of 2021. But what is your speculation as to when you think we'll actually get to being able to see performances? And do you think it'll be like a revised version, like you'll go to a theater that might have been in the past 1,000-seater, and it'll only be a 200-seater because of these distance rules that we're going to have in terms of social distancing and in terms of the ways that the stage will be constructed, and also the way more succinctly that the audience will have to be out there. So I do know that even in some of the theaters here, they're talking about plans that cut like 1,000-seater down to like 148 to 150-seater. So what is your own speculations, and what are you hearing out of Nashville and other parts of the music business as to when we will actually see live performances again?
Yeah, I feel like here in Nashville, it was interesting to see the honky tonks try to get open, and I think they kind of got ahead of themselves, and had to kind of pull back and the city had to, or the metro county had to kind of pull back and go back to phase 2 and make sure that not big groups of people weren't getting too busy, and but it's it's been interesting, all the different venues that are of course they're in limbo, probably trying to pay their mortgage or lease or whichever deal, and I know there's definitely been kind of a joining of all the venues around the country, and voicing the need to help keep the venues alive on a national basis, and at the same time, I've seen some of my favorite bands have been scheduling shows for even mid 2021. So as long as that that does seem like that'll be quite a while before, or at least I would think at the beginning of next year would be the soonest that concerts get back into effect, and I did have a friend that they were going to perform a show. They would do a monthly show in a amazing cover band. A lot of session players, just real, and they get the crowd dancing, but they were gonna do 2 shows in a day, like instead of, more like almost like a jazz, when ensemble, when they'll do maybe 2 or 3 different sets, and just kind of where they could have the less capacity, per performance, but then they could end up making hopefully closer to what they're. I think it was going to be 50% capacity for doing a 2-show approach. So it's kind of sounds case by case, but collectively it'll be sounds like a little while before we'll all get to get down there and enjoy some shows.
Yep, definitely. Now, I'd like to hear from all of you. How do you think we're doing in terms of education? Because I think when I think of the creative world, and definitely when I think of some others, I think about the fact that we don't hear enough of the creativity. And we were talking definitely to Keenan earlier about not hearing the correct approach in my mind as to how we should teach science. But I'd like to hear, even with, I'll start with you, Paul, how do you think we're doing in terms of even teaching sustainability to our kids? Because I remember going to school, and I went to school, grade school, in the late 70s because I graduated high school in 1980. And I remember there was courses in everything from home economics to, like, there were organizations like Future Farmers of America, because I was in a rural area, to 4-H, to a number of other things that actually did teach a lot about Mother Nature, sustainability, things of that nature. But I think we got away from that, and I'm not going to put it on one administration or another. I just think that over several decades, we've gotten away from that in terms of it being a taught field and something that is actually encouraged even on our grade school level. I don't even know that it's taught that much on the college level, because I know I'm not that far from Duke's campus, and I can tell you there's a lot of times that I see, and particularly before the virus, but even now, a lot of things that would be things that we're doing to destroy nature, whether that's throwing trash of one sort or another out there. That's actually one of my beefs, even with the great things of masks. And I agree we need to have the mask, we need to do the social distancing, we need to wash our hands. But I don't know about you or where you are in Montana, but I don't know that we're helping Mother Nature if you sign the mask on the ground, because I'm thinking that's probably a form of pollution in and of itself. And I have seen that even here in North Carolina. So I just wondering your take, Paul, as to how we're doing in terms of teaching sustainability and teaching about conservation and things of that nature.
Well, naturally, I believe that all schools should teach the things that I want them to teach and not teach the things that I think are silly. So I think we all feel that way, and there's a lot of competition. But if I could go in and say to teach just one thing that's missing and that has been missing, I mean, granted, I've written this book on basically sustainability, and I really want that. But I would say what's even more important would be logic, reason, and fallacy. I kind of feel like there's an enormous part of our media that reaches us, and a lot of the conversations that are being had are riddled with fallacy. And so I'm embarrassed to hear the amount of fallacy that people will repeat. That they'll be convinced that this is the argument. This is the thing that you say that makes it so that the rest of these decisions make sense. And I kind of feel like there are so few people that understand it. It seems like such a critically important thing that it should be in the schools in the 3rd grade and up. Like, there should be at least a month of it for every grade from the 3rd grade on up. I mean, how is it that we can have a discussion with somebody and they'll say, hey, do you want to go to the movies? Nah. Oh, come on. Well, okay. What happened there? Why is it that, oh, come on, was a persuasive argument? What changed? So it shows the power of fallacy, how crazy it is. And we see it not just in politics, but in everything. And it's like, how can we make decisions about what to do in the face of so much fallacy, especially in a social media age where so much of our decisions are made in social media, where people are talking about this topic or that topic, and then people throw the way that they make decisions is almost entirely through fallacy. So I'm sorry, you poked a button. I went off.
No problem.
Logic and reason and fallacy.
Yeah, I agree. We do need to have more reasoning and more things of that nature. And there's a lot of fallacies that are out there. That actually comes back to you, Kaden, because part of what you're trying to do, even with reimagining science, is use social media to get folks to reimagine science. So how does this work? How are you using social media as a tool to get people to reimagine science? Because I know that's part of what you're doing is you're trying to use some of these things that he's talking about, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or some of the other tools that are social media tools, to get people to rethink even the concept of science. So how are you using these tools?
Yeah, well, there's some really hot topics and conversations just whizzing around out there, and many people in the sciences are very facile with them. I will say that the way I use Twitter, it's been very interesting because it has in the past when we would travel, it's been where a single tweet could end up getting me on a plane to go somewhere because it's a network of knowledge of like who's doing what where. So when you're connected to somebody by Twitter and then they are tweeting something that you can see is in the area that you have a very high interest, you now know about this other organization, this other event. So in that way, Twitter has had a very physical impact on me. Also getting the word out, and Paul, you were talking about it in a way that I do agree. We think so quickly and in some ways very lightly. There's a lot of need, I believe, for much more reflective thinking. And I'm going to try to keep it simple enough here, my own thinking, but there's so many layers to this around the sovereignty of the individual and honoring an individual and what they are feeling and what they express about themselves. And I think to get back to what you were saying, Mark, about children these days, the ones that I've known for quite a while don't need to be taught about environmental responsibility. They're carrying the banner on it in many ways. They have a very native sense of what the needs are. If you want to go to inspiration, go to our younger generations and you'll find it there. I think part of the logic part is around discerning what you're listening to, why it's speaking to you, what you're really about, what the purpose is. And I think I'll end with there's a really interesting lens that I've looked through in terms of communication, where one could make a claim that everything that a person says is either a promise, a request, or a declaration. And most of what we do are declarations. And so it's a very clean way so that, come on the movies, it's kind of a request, right? And so it does have impact that you could say is a fallacy or it's a logical error, but it's actually a request. So these emotional things are what impact us, I think, the most. So paying attention to that is a very important thing.
And I want to give back to both of you, and I also want to hear from Brandon as well, because one of the things that I've been really impressed by, and I would mention this on another podcast that I do as well on Monday, is the impact of our youth. And I was just wondering, I'd like to hear, because I know even with the Black Lives Matter movement, it seems that it's now being a very much of a youth-led movement, and I actually encourage that because they have a different agenda, but they also need to have a more established action plan. I don't know all the times that some of the other civil rights groups had that much of an action plan, whereas there seems to be like more specific things that they want to accomplish within the Black Lives Matter. Now, I agree with what Dean said earlier, that there's some things that they still need to fine-tune, and there's some other actions that need to be done that have not been done. But I do think that some of these young folks actually do have a greater action plan than maybe some of those in our generation. But I was just wondering, how do you think that is going into like the sustainability movement, which I kind of also put in the same camp with the environmental movement? Because to me, I'm wondering, is it still an active environmental movement out there? I know that we did see a little bit of it when the person that currently occupies the White House went over there to Mount Rushmore, because there were some people involved in the sustainability movement, the Native movement, and in the environmental movement. They were trying to say that they didn't necessarily want them there because they had some environmental concerns and some health concerns. But I was just wondering, what is your take of Paul? So I'll start with you, Paul, and then I'd like to hear from the other guests as well, as to the other movements. We always hear about the Black Lives Matter movement. Before that, we heard about the Me Too movement with the women and everything. But I don't know that we heard as much about the environmental movement. And in all fairness, I will say that I have been an environmentalist for a long time because I actually grew up in Warrenton, North Carolina, which was kind of the home of environmental justice because that's where they did some of the chemical dumps, and there were protests against that based on people's concerns about their health back in the, I believe it was the late 70s and the early 80s. And I was also a fan of a book called Ecotage, which is kind of like environmental terrorism, for lack of a better term. But I was just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of the environmental movement and whether it is still a strong movement out there.
I'm going to say that a lot of in fact, in my book, one of the earliest chapters is to talk about environmentalists versus environmentalists, where one of the words is in quotes, and how there's been a lot of effort to move things forward, and we get a lot of people where it's like, I'm moving this forward because of the environment, and then the opposing side is, I'm moving it my way because of the environment. And so then it's kind of like, let's find out who the real environmentalists are. And I kind of feel like there's a lot of people out there that are pushing an agenda for the sake of the environment, only they aren't really. So the thing that concerns me about this space that you're asking about is that I think that there's a lot of people out there that are shouting at the top of their lungs for the environment. And what it turns out to really be is for my wallet. And so there's a lot of greenwashing right now, just an incredible amount, just an insane amount. And a lot of these environmental organizations are like screaming about the environment while at the same time they've got their hand out to try and get more money, so that way they're getting paid to scream. And so I guess I'm saying I'm personally disappointed in a lot of it. I wish for some form of integrity. In my book, I basically say, and this is where I kind of get in a lot of trouble. I say we know that the average amount that an American adult spends $1,000 per year on electricity and heat. And so that's per adult. And so I state in my book that if you are spending more than that, you lost your license to call yourself an environmentalist. Now, and I've had a lot of people get really upset about this, but the thing is we're talking about half of America spends more than that, and half spends less. And it's like we're going in and we're seeing these battles waged where both parties are rooting for the environment, but clearly one party seems to be walking the talk and the other party is not, but they're both adamant. And I kind of feel like, I think that this party has to stop saying that they're an environmentalist because they didn't make the cut.
Interesting point. Just out of curiosity, what are your thoughts on minimalists? Like, I had a friend of mine, and that's because I know part of the reason she thought about being a minimalist, even though she's not now, which is like, getting the mini house, the small house, and living kind of that off-the-grid kind of lifestyle. And I do know that was popular there for a minute, right before COVID hit. So maybe like a few years back, a lot of people were talking about going the minimalist route, getting like either the mini house or like doing other things to cut back on their use of electricity or cut back on some of these things that you're talking about. Was that just a passing fad, or do you think that was something that a lot of people were legitimately considering, and do you think that it had any legs to stand on in terms of being part of the sustainability movement? Because I do know that I've had a couple of friends that had thought about doing that, partially because of what you just said. They were tired of paying these crazy electric bills, these crazy water bills, if they have a water bill, because I know sometimes the water comes in the rent, but oftentimes it doesn't, because I know I have to pay a separate water bill, which actually is kind of crazy because the water bill is actually run by, I'm in North Carolina, but the water bill comes from an agency out of Florida. I'm going to say that I think that the tiny house movement, along with the minimalist movement, I think it's perfectly lovely and great. I want to point out
just real quick, in 1950, that the average person, the average adult, used 297 square feet of housing. And they generally lived in, their home was about 1,000 square feet. And in 2010, it went from 297 to 853. And the average home went from 1,000 square feet to 2,200 square feet. So I have to applaud the people that are doing the tiny house thing. They are, I mean, when you're the room that you occupy, the space that you occupy, the housed area that you occupy is smaller than the American average, then the amount of energy that you consume is also smaller. And so I cannot help but applaud that. As far as the minimalist thing goes, I think that there's a lot to be said for it. There's a lot to be said for it from a more artistic and heart space as well. And I want to. There's many ways to look at it, but I kind of feel like some of it is traveling a path where people are temporarily minimalists, and so what they do is they dump a bunch of their possessions, and then they decide that it's not for them, and then they go out and they acquire a whole bunch of new possessions. I would like to see more of like, I know that this is going to be a very unpopular thing to say. I would like us to try and solve our problems with trying to get 20 people to live under one roof together, because we don't do it for very good reasons. The drama is off the charts, and it's kind of like, is it plausible to solve that problem? Can we somehow turn the drama knob from 9 down to a 1 and be able to do that? Because then we're back to, like, instead of talking about somebody living in a tiny house that's 200 square feet, maybe we could do something similar that's going to be in a larger, more luxuriant home with a bunch of people, and it averages out to 200 square feet per person. And then the things that would mark somebody as being not a minimalist would be more like the possessions of the house. And then everybody living in such a house could, in a way, be kind of like a minimalist. Their average footprint, physical footprint, would be smaller, and so many of the possessions would be common between people that it would be like they're a minimalist.
Definitely. I can see that happening for sure. And it's interesting you say that, because I've actually had friends of mine that are, because of Zoom and some of the things that we were talking about earlier, that are living in other parts of the world. Because I think that this is definitely making the world smaller, because we're finding friends and acquaintances that are living in places like India and South Africa and the various African countries, Nigeria, for example, and just Costa Rica and different other parts of the world that we're meeting, that we might not meet face-to-face, but because of Zoom and StreamYard and some of the other platforms, we are meeting these people. And that is one of the things that I'm finding in talking to my friends around the world, is that, unfortunately, and I think part of that is, the certain things that happen in American society and American culture over several decades and centuries and everything, we have become a household of, I'm not going to lie, I live in an apartment by myself. And there's others that are here in the same complex that are in the same kind of situations, and even houses that might be one or two occupied or whatever. Whereas when I talk to my friends in India, they still got their parents and in some cases their grandparents living with them. So I agree that some of our cultures seem to be more in tune to having these kind of like households that are still multi-generational and things of that nature. So I was just wondering y'all's own takes on that. Keenan, do you think you could survive with, you said you have a partner, and you also have, imagine your parents are still with us, and maybe you have kids. Could you live in a household with all of y'all together, or would you drive each other crazy, as Paul just said might happen?
Good. Oof, right? So I'll say first, one of the things I love about what you're bringing, Paul, with what you've been speaking about, and I imagine your book as well, is this idea of doing it yourself, like that you look at what you yourself can do, that you're part of the system. And I think that that's a major part of the kind of change that we need. That culture that you're talking about, Mark, is, I'm just going to say that's a tough one for me. Personally, I've thought about this a lot, and in fact, a lot of my stuff is in storage right now because I sold a big house. I actually was moving onto a boat for a bit, And I've gone through, why do I need this stuff? But they're very personal to me. They all have meaning. The things, the possessions I have a very porous storage where I go in and it's where I can get to things. And it'll be things like pictures of my kids and things that I really treasure. So I can admit, I'm that would be a hard one for me, is to live in a communal setting, and there's also an argument to be had that one should not be possession focused, and I can see those arguments. And yet I'm like you in your, just you in the apartment. I like to live in my own space. I like something about having that kind of special place to be able to exist within. I actually also have a question for Brandon, though, if you don't mind me throwing it out there about this. There's a whole other dimension that we've been, kind of bringing in a little bit around slowing down and what is life about, what is there to enjoy. I want to ask Brandon about music, because music is something, well, what's coming to mind? Let me just pose it. I heard a really good interview by one of the first fans of the Sex Pistols and like that whole band group and that whole era, who'd written a book, Clothes, 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 Boys, 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 Music, Music, Music. And she wrote a second book about her mother. And she talked about when her mom was dying, she couldn't believe it, that she was in her last few days, maybe last few hours, and reading a book about American history. And she thought, why would this person be reading a book to better themselves and know more when they're about to leave the planet, right? And it really throws you into this question of what is life for. And I think music is one of those areas where, like, if we could slow down and enjoy what we have more, to be in the moment, some of these things would sort themselves out, it feels like. It might seem like a strange question, but I've been sitting here really wanting to ask Brandon about that, about his take on this whole existence in music.
And I want to bring Brandon in, but I also want to bring in Patrice Hawthorne, who had been calling in earlier, and then she dropped, but she came back. Now, some of y'all may not know who Patrice Hawthorne is, but Patrice Hawthorne is one of the members of Peaches and Herb. There was that group Peaches and Herb, and I understand that there was definitely Herb, and there were several Peaches, but she was, I believe, the third Peaches and the one that was there for a number of years and everything. So, Patrice, you're hearing us talk about things around environment and science and things of that nature. As you just heard, Keenan apparently is a big fan of Peaches and Herb, because she just let out a big sigh when I mentioned that you were part of that group and everything. So definitely tell us a little bit about what music means to you, how you got involved in music, because you were a contestant. That's how you became one of the people that was part of the Peaches and Herb group and everything. So just talk about, and then I do want to hear from Brandon as well, as to how important music is as we're dealing with these hard times. Because I agree that music is sometimes what is our go-to, even to have like some sort of stability in our lives in these hard times. So definitely I would like to hear your conversation about what you're doing and with your music now, because you're taking it on a whole nother level. You're going as an independent artist after you had been with that world-famous group for a number of years.
Right, exactly. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am Peaches number 4. So, not number 3, but I was Peaches number 4. And I worked with the original Herb from 1990 to 2002. So that was just an awesome experience, performing with him. But speaking of music, music is, as it has been often said, a universal, definitely a universal language. And it's just very soothing to the soul, and it's very important to me, especially when I'm performing, to know that I am reaching and touching the number of people's lives that have told me that, especially the people, the senior citizens. I perform for them a lot, and they always express how I have touched them, how I brought back a memory, and some of them, really get emotional about it. Sometimes they're, in tears, or whatever. But it's just a wonderful feeling to be able to sing, to be able to share music, and to just move people in the way that music does. It's just incredible. It's just awesome.
Definitely. And Brandon, share a little bit about how music has impacted you as well, being a musician there in Nashville and things of that nature, and kind of maybe even answer the question that Keenan was asking as to your feelings about that when you're talking to people and having that musical place.
Yes, I'm just very grateful growing up, with a family that just was so, we had instruments around the house, and, Mom and Dad both moved here in the 70s to just for music. I love. It's always inspiring here whenever stories will be brought up about them. Just kind of taking that leap and following their heart and love for music and I totally I love hearing what Peaches said too, and just that. It feels so good to know that the music that you're making, is bringing a positive effect, on somebody's heart and soul, and I love singing. Well, I was in choir in high school, but it's always, there's something about when everybody sings together. I think that's just one of the most cool, like whether it's the harmonies, and just all. I just kind of to zoom out. I almost passed away in 2004, and I was in a car wreck and fell asleep at the wheel. But it was it was interesting after going through that. I just kind of had this I guess image of how. It was kind of an image, and I should do a painting sometime. That would be really interesting to see how it comes out on canvas. But how everybody, I feel like we're all different melodies, and it's cool how we all, interact with each other. And there's dissonant. Sometimes there's dissonant, harmonies, and then there's harmonic harmonies that go. It's just kind of fascinating how, it's like life is a composition in itself, and it's cool to, it's cool, I just love how everybody, can have, if you want to play an instrument, there's, nobody can stop you from, no one should be able to stop you from, expressing yourself on an instrument. And more than that, I guess just the fact that we all have voices, it kind of blows my mind as we're all just kind of talking about this. And, whether it's I'm singing in the car with the, with the windows down, or, singing your favorite song in the shower. It's just such a cool, just expression to get to create, so I feel like it's always there. If you want to be creative, you can do that with your voice. So it's so lovely. And then of course when you're with a band or a group of people just making, there's nothing like connecting with with people when you're playing music or singing together.
Yeah, that's very true. Patrice, I was just wondering, could you share with us what your feelings are? We talked about it earlier with the scientists and everything, but how do you think we're doing in terms of education, in terms of using music? Because I remember growing up that definitely there was a push for the creative arts but the creative arts to be taught in the school system. I personally feel that we've pushed away from that, and that we're not encouraging as much of our creative artists within the school system. But that's just my personal belief. I want to know whether you think that we're doing a good enough job of teaching the creative arts in the school system, and that includes music, that includes visual arts, that includes the whole realm of the artistic field. That also includes theater and film. But I was just wondering what your take is as one that has been in the industry for a number of years.
Well, I went to Creative and Performing Arts High School, but now I am not. When you were asking me that question, it was a very interesting one, because I was thinking about my 16-year-old and how I was trying to think about how I guess, caught up I am on what is actually going on in the schools system today. But based on what I have seen from my daughter's school, it is not as involved as it was when I went to school. And I guess maybe that's kind of what you're getting at. I mean, we had a lot of different types of music going on, like you would take up you actually, sometimes you were required, I'm trying to think back, because you're taking me back now. I'm like 150 years old, but no, you were required to take up an instrument in school, and I don't think that they make that I don't think that they do that now. I'm not really sure, but I just think that what I do hear, that there needs to be a lot more musical outlets in the school system, because I have heard that a lot of the music programs are being shut down. They're just not doing it anymore. And sometimes they're talking about the funding that they lack, to buy instruments for the kids. So all the different issues that they're facing with that. But I think it really needs to, because music is so important and because it really has a way of bringing so many different races and nationalities together, and because it is so important in terms of one's development, which goes into a lot of stuff, just how a person learns, how a person expresses themselves. There's so many different studies and links to the importance of music with a child's growth that I think that it is absolutely essential. And I think that there needs to be more focus on it, because I don't think that there is enough focus in the school system on that. So that's definitely something that needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It definitely needs to be addressed and things of that nature. And you're so right. I'm thinking about, I do not claim to be the best dancer in the world. Actually, I think that I'm a pretty bad dancer, but I've had friends of mine that are doing that whole Daybreakers thing. So it's kind of like a big-time Zoom dance party, and I'll pop in there and actually attempt to dance. I don't have a disco light. I need a disco light, because my theory is that a disco light makes anybody look good dancing, because it gives you that motion illusion that makes you think that you're dancing really well. But I don't claim to be the best dancer in the world. But one of the things that I would agree with you on, Patrice, and everything, is that music and dance seem to be those unifying factors that, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. There's songs that are out there that, if they're played in the club or whatever, nobody's thinking about what somebody's race is, what religion they are, what their orientation is. They're just certain songs that automatically get people out there on the dance floor. And some of them might even be sappy songs. Like, I had a friend of mine who was on another kind of show that was similar to this, and he played the song Achy Breaky Heart. I do not claim to be a Billy Cyrus fan, but that song actually does get people to tap their feet, and of course everybody has gone through that heartbreak that we've all gone through. I would argue We Are the World is another one of those songs that is definitely has sappy lyrics, but everybody loved it. I would argue that several of those disco songs of like the era that Peaches and Herb came out of were similar kind of songs, whether that's the Village People's YMCA, or whether that's Kool and the Gang Celebration, and I could several of the songs by Chic that they did, or even I'm friends with Aaron Mills, who was part of Cameo. So, of course, everybody remembers Word Up. So there's songs like that that I think just anybody will get out there and get on the dance floor with. So that's just wanted to add that to the conversation. But real quickly, because tell the folks that are listening what you're doing now, because a lot of folks, like you said, you were there from those periods that you gave us and everything, and then you got out of the business, and now you're back in the business with your own band, and you're doing your own thing. So what got you out of the business? What get you back into the business? And tell us a little bit about the new band that you put together, and what that sound is going to be all about, and where we can find that sound.
Okay, well, I have been in the business. I mean, I stopped performing with her from, in 2002, And basically because I got pretty busy with my own band called Patrice and the Show, as well as doing voiceovers and a little acting and some commercials and jingles. So I just decided to do all that fun stuff, and it took up a whole lot of my time because I wanted to, really be able to explore some other things that I wasn't able to when because of time, time-wise, because I was on the road or doing, various other projects with her. But so that's what happened there. And then I just started getting more into writing my own music, and that's kind of where I am now. I also joined a group called the First Ladies of Rock and Soul, which is an all-60s group. We do all 60s music, and it's a 14-piece band, a four-female front. And so that kept me busy as well. But that group, I sang a song called Darling Forever. And a lot of people would tell me or ask me to actually record the song, because they loved it so much. And there were many times I would get, some standing ovation and stuff like that after I sang the song. And I never recorded it until last year. Yeah, I just decided to finally record the song, and I did, and it was received very well. It's being played on a lot of radio stations, and from there I revised We Got Love, which is a dance tune, and I just started, releasing more of my original tunes, and like I said, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been, really received well. So that's basically where I am now with it. There are some other projects that are kind of was on the table, but it's at a standstill right now because of the current situation that we're in. One of the things that I was about to do was to be featured in a play in Baltimore around the time that this situation that we're in happened. So, like I said, there are a lot of things like that that are kind of on the back burner right now because we don't really have an idea as to when things will be opened up again, for or when it'll be safe, for everyone to go back to their normal businesses and things like that. So, yeah.
Gotcha. And are you doing any virtual concerts? Because I knew there were several performers around. Like I think Steve Van Sant is doing a virtual concert this Thursday, and I know some of the other performers of different areas are doing virtual concerts, even some of our local musicians. So are you doing any virtual concerts, or have you gotten into that realm of doing things yet?
No, I have done virtual performances for the seniors. I do a lot of those, a lot. I even actually go and perform for them at various venues, like in the courtyard, like they'll be in their balcony or kind of, far away from me while they're listening and stuff like that, or, they'll get up and, dance, wherever they are in the area in the courtyard. But yeah, not in terms of other outside of the seniors. No, I haven't done anything yet. With that. Nope.
Gotcha. So, Keenan, you said that you were excited when you realized it was Peaches and Herb. So I assume you must have a favorite Peaches and Herb song.
Oh, you can't put me on the spot like that. I can't even name my top favorite song. So, but Patrice is really
and Herb songs.
Yeah.
Reunited, Shake Your Groove thing. I Pledge My Love.
There's a ton of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're a cool groove. Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Definitely. And definitely. Coming back to the conversation and everything, what kind of words of encouragement would all of you give to folks that are listening, like particularly not just the young folks, but just folks in general? I mean, we're going through so many hard times and so many times of turmoil, whether it's the folks that are dealing with the economic crises that they may be facing. Some of that might be because they're not doing what they need to do sustainability-wise, as Paul was saying, or for various other reasons. But what kind of words of encouragement would you give to folks, whether they're a youngster or whether they're an old person? And I guess I'll start with you first, Keenan, and work my way down. So I guess I'll go Keenan, Paul, Brandon, and then Patrice. But what kind of words of encouragement would you give to folks that are listening out there and that might need to hear these kind of words of encouragement just as they're going through the various crises that we are facing?
Right? Yeah, I think it's about becoming more human and humane together. And I would say, paying attention to when you feel that you're in that groove, which for me is getting goosebumps. And even Brandon, when you were talking about music and this, that everyone has a melody, I was getting like full body goosebumps, which is a really great sign. So I think it's about really tapping into how we can be better humans together.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Paul, what are some of the things that you would encourage people to do? And tell folks a little bit more in detail about the book. So if you want to go into a lot of details about the book as you're giving these words of encouragement, that'll be cool too, because I do know that you definitely have this great book and folks need to know some of these tips that you're giving. So I would love for you to share some of the tips that you're giving people as well. And definitely we want them to get the book, but definitely if you'll share a lot of that information, I would appreciate it.
So my book is Building a Better World in Your Backyard Instead of Being Angry at Bad Guys. And I would have to say that my words of encouragement to somebody, and you asked me to pick specific things out of the book, and so I do. I have a chapter in the book that is kind of like in many ways a perfect fit. Radically deviant financial strategies. So you mentioned a lot of people are in financial stress right now. I advocate a path that basically starts off with saying that the thing that eats away at your soul in a big way is going to be financial stress, and there's a variety of other stresses. We're talking about how different kinds of music feed your soul. I kind of felt like that was really excellent. I kind of want to talk about people who are together, and there may be musicians in the group of people, and how being there and something that's a little bit more spontaneous, that's a powerfully soul-building experience to have, especially regularly. At the same time, when somebody's in a financial crisis of any kind, boy, that just really tears you down to the core, and you could find yourself in quite the pickle. I advocate a path that's going to be more about trying to live significantly more humbly because a lot of people live very hand to mouth. It's like if they were to lose their job for even a week, they might find their whole life being destroyed. And being that close to the edge is really develops an ulcer for anybody. It's so stressful. And so I wish to advocate living far, far more humbly and socking away income. At the same time, when you find yourself at home for a big slice of time, I wish to advocate exploring passive income streams or residual income streams. And as we have musicians here, then of course they're already doing the things that I advocate, which is going to be to create a passive income stream. And there's a good chance that each of them has a monthly income that comes in, and if they, for whatever reason, did not work for 3 months, then that income would still come, and it would still be showing up. And there's so many ways of doing that. I think that the next thing, I think the most powerful tool to get to the point that you have something that will bring you in a passive income is, and this is going to sound really bizarre and weird and silly, but bear with me, is to give things away. So here you are at home and you have time on your hands. There's things that you could do to entertain yourself, but I think your soul will be filled more if you do things that you like and find ways to give that away, whether it's music or writing or perhaps some other form of art, and you give it away and you give it away and you give it away, and then in time you might be surprised that some of the things that you're giving away, there's some kind of small way to monetize it. Next thing you know, you have $20 a month coming in. And it'll keep coming in even if you stop doing anything. And then once you have $20 a month coming in, it turns out it doesn't take much more to get that up to $200 a month. When you've got this money coming in every month, and you could stop working and it keeps coming in, then that's a gift to your future self. And it makes it so that you've got a plan B. And then, of course, all of these things, I wish to suggest a path where a person effectively retire in just 5 years, 4 years, something of that nature, and then pursue what they truly love, whether it's to make money or not, to enjoy life thoroughly and deeply, instead of finding yourself in a horrible pickle where if you lose your job or if you've lost your job, suddenly your world comes crashing down around you.
Well, you're getting a good point there. I definitely want to get to my two entertainers as well, but just to come to what you were saying, I think I read somewhere, and I've heard different figures, but one of the figures I heard was that something like 30% of the society will be facing foreclosures or mortgage crisis just this year. So, and then I heard another figure that it could be as high as 70%. So that's a lot of folks that are going to be dealing with a serious economic crisis if those figures are anywhere near correct. And I've heard that 30% figure on several news reports and several media sites. So I do believe the 30% is definitely true. The 70% is probably a little bit astronomical, and that may be a exaggeration. But I can definitely see 30%, and if that's the case, then that's kind of comes to that old saying that I know a lot of us remember hearing, which is that we're only one paycheck away from being in the poorhouse or being in that poverty situation, which comes back to a lot of what your book is about, which is there are so many ways that we can sustain ourselves without some of these things that are going on. Like, I was just wondering, I have a friend of mine, and then I'm going to get, like I said, to the two artists, but my friend does a lot of work around fairness in electricity bills and things of that nature. So they have a group here in North Carolina that does a lot of work to try to make sure that the utility bills are not hitting us in the sustainability pocket. So how do you deal with that? I mean, you're in Montana, so I don't know, are the bills as high there as they are in other parts of the country? And is that a part of the fight that you deal with when you're dealing with sustainability and that carbon blueprint? Because like I mentioned earlier, I'm still trying to figure out why the apartment complex that I'm in uses a Florida company to regulate the water, because it's actually, the bill comes out of Florida. It doesn't come out of North Carolina.
I'm going to say, first of all, here in Montana, the cost of electricity isn't too bad. But I do want to say that I'm going to take several of the things that I've said and go much, much, much farther and say, let's imagine, and I refer to this in my book as what I call a permaculture millionaire. We named her Gert for poetic license. And so much has evolved from this. We call it Gerting It. You'll have a couple of acres. You'll have a humble home, a massive garden, and it's all paid for. Basically, it's kind of back to that minimalist and tiny house thing that you were talking about earlier. And this is what we suggest as a potential destination. And when you have this and you've learned to live humbly and you're not on the grid, then when those entities that are involved with the grid play their games that are unkind, that are less than wholesome, that are not respectful to other human beings, which we know that they will, then it doesn't matter anymore. I mean, in fact, when you live in the city, you have to pay a lot of attention to politics, because it's possible somebody could get elected who makes really poor choices, and you could find yourself without food. And it could be like not just without food, but months without food. And possibly death is on the table now because of choices that politicians have made. Whereas when you're girding it, everything in the city, all of that stuff about politicians and the like, all becomes really small and far away and doesn't matter as much. So again, I want to come back to the thing about soul building versus soul draining I mean, I think there's a lot of soul draining element when you look into politics and you're like, wow, this is crazy. And if those people make poor choices, I could be in a lot of trouble. And I could even die from their poor choices. So I wish to advocate for a path towards something where these political problems become very small and far away.
Yeah, I think I can definitely agree with that. Patrice, I was just wondering, have you ever attempted, as you've done all this traveling around the world and doing these performances, have you ever tried to do either kind of this sustainability living or even tried to plant a garden, or is just too much time being on the road that you couldn't ever get involved in those kind of things? Or is that something that you did try to do yourself as well?
You said plant a garden?
Yes.
Is that what you said? Yeah, I actually have. Not too long ago, I wasn't too successful. I grew one little tiny tomato, and then the squirrels got to it, and they ate that, and I got frustrated because I put a lot of work into it. But I plan on trying it again. So, yeah, no, that is about the extent of it. I just recently did that, and I actually am growing some herbs right now, though. So I'm trying. I don't have a serious green thumb, but I am trying because I think.
Would that be herb number 3 then?
Exactly.
With peaches and herb.
Exactly. It's elderflower, elderflower herb. But yeah, so I'm trying because I really love that type of thing. I am very much into healthy eating, and I have not. I'm a pescatarian / vegan, so I haven't eaten meat in over 35 years, and I eat a lot of fruit and vegetables and fish and stuff like that. So I would love to have my own garden, and maybe hopefully one day I will get there. But sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying. But anyway.
As long as you're trying, that's what counts. What made you decide to go What made you decide to go as a performer the non-meat route? Was it something health-wise, or was it something that you just decided to do based on some of your own reading, or what made you decide to go the pescatarian, vegan route in your own career and in your own life and everything? So I was just curious as to what made you decide to go that route.
The crazy thing for me is that a friend of mine asked me to do it so many years ago. She was just like, hey, let's stop, eating meat. And I forget why she wanted to do it. I think we were reading something about it or whatever. And I said, okay, sure, fine, I'll try it. And I stopped eating it. And here's the thing. I've never been my favorite food is actually seafood anyway. So when I stopped eating it, I didn't miss it. She was back.
So you didn't miss it at all. Wow.
No, and there was a lot of different reasons. My mom asked me one time to help clean the turkey, and I was plucking the feathers out, and it started to bleed, and that just disgusted me. And little crazy stuff like that, But of course, I know people that have a problem with fish. Say, well, what about the fish? When you hook the fish in the mouth, and I'm sure that goes there, but I don't see that. She asked me to clean that turkey, and I couldn't get that sight out of my head. So it's just stuff like that. It has nothing to do with it's not non-religious anyway, but it has nothing to do with that. I just think it's healthier. To be honest, there's a lot of cancers and other illnesses that you can acquire by eating too much of too many meats, processed foods, and stuff like that. I mean, it's so much evidence of that, So that's one of the reasons why I don't do it as well. So I'm good with what I eat. I like being healthy. It feels great. And people, I'm 55. People look at me and they're like, "What?" I feel good. I feel great. I've never had the flu, never had a flu shot. I rarely get sick. It's just fun to not be sick. My allergies kick my butt, but the last time I had a cold might have been 5 years ago, so I probably catch a cold every 4 to 5 years. Other than that, yeah. So I'm good. I have fun with it, just being healthy and seeing how long I can be this vibrant and have this much energy and look, this young and go to the doctors and they're like, yeah, you're great. No issues, no problems. That's fun. It's fun. So
that's terrific.
Yeah, it sounds great. And by the way, I've seen the picture of you and everything, and I'll post it on one of our Instagrams so that the other guests can see it as well. You will never believe that she's the age that she just quoted, because when I look at the picture, I'm like, who is this 40-year-old that's over here telling me that she's one of the peaches in her? Because she definitely did not look like she was in her 60s. She looked more like in the 40s or something like that, because definitely did not look in the 60s at all.
Thank you. I didn't know.
So, what advice would you give? What advice would you give to folks that are both trying to get into the music business, as just advice in general? So, not just our musicians, but also just people in general. What advice would you give to folks as well?
Well, one of the things, there's a couple of things that I heard from the other, people that were speaking that I definitely agree with, and it just reminded me of. I think Emerson said this, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. And it just reminded me of his quote, and it's just so true. I think that we, especially at the top, this moment that we are in right now has caused people to look inward and to realize what is most important in their lives. And I think that if we do more soul searching and look within and just try to better ourselves and to be kind to others, as what was mentioned, to be giving, it would be amazing if like every single person on the planet would do that. I just think that it would be awesome, and it would create a better world. And it just makes me even think of music, too, because music, it just goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Music is such a core human experience amongst us all. I mean, I don't even know if there is any, which would be interesting to know, is there any person on this planet that does not like music? Whatever type of music it is, it seems like every single person. Now, maybe there is somebody that would be kind of interesting to find, but it seems like whatever type of music it is, whether it's country, classical, whatever, it's music is just such a beautiful thing because it has so many benefits. Because you go, the musician, the singer, like really goes inward and pulls these emotions from within their soul, and they share that, with other people, and people feel that. And with that, music, what it does for other people, it reduces stress, it, lessens anxiety, it improves, people's memory. I've heard of people with dementia that, the music helps their memory to come back. It eases people's pain. It provides comfort. It improves your cognitive abilities. I mean, I could go on and on about the benefits of music. And I just think that it's just a wonderful, beautiful thing to be able to be a vessel to give that to other people.
Definitely. And Brandon, I'm thinking that music probably meant a lot to you as well. You talked about that you were involved in that automobile accident. I'm imagining that probably even music helped you during that healing process. So if you would talk a little bit more about what music means to you and any words of advice that you got for the folks that are listening as well. But I'm thinking that music might have even helped you get through that accident, and I don't know how serious the accident was, but if you just share with us a little bit about what music meant to you even during that healing process.
Yes. Man, it was really interesting. That's a fun question to be able to answer. Just it makes me think of this one album, and I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say like an artist name or album name, but it was.
You can.
Okay, it was this album by a group from the UK. They're called Muse, and Absolution was the name of the album, and it was kind of interesting. I was in the rehab hospital I was in the ICU for like 2 weeks in a induced coma, and then like a month in the rehab hospital. But it was weird because like my brain had gotten bruised, and like I was they had me on a lot of just I guess whatever kind of drugs that are in hospitals, to keep you from the pain and whatnot. And but just kind of coming out of that coma was interesting to kind of come out of that, kind of like it was every week, and then like every other day, and then every day, but my comprehension was coming back, and I was exercising that the mental mental therapy, just like as far as to exercise that brain after getting injured. But that album, Muse Absolution, I just found it so incredible. The lyrics were so kind of serendipitous with what I had gone through. So it really like, it's a weird how you can like feel your heart skip a beat almost, just when you listen to something that lines up with your life, or like so that it was really inspiring, to listen to that and come out of that and have a definite, I guess, a new appreciation, and perspective of how precious life is. And that I guess if that answers the question, I felt like there was probably a couple other albums that one of my favorite albums was, I think, On the Stereo when I fell asleep at the wheel in the car, so it was like it was another UK band, Radiohead. They're real kind of ethereal and spacey tracks, but man, it's just I think it was Subterranean Homesick Alien, the song on OK Computer, and it's one of my favorite songs, and I find it. I had driven through the night with my friend back from Florida. It was like our senior year, spring break in high school, and it was like I was like 10 minutes from getting home, of course, and they say you get real comfortable when you're in the familiar kind of setting, or you see the places that you're used to seeing, being close to home. And I zoned out, hit a tree going like 50, about 50 miles per hour. But the music, it's always amazing how music can line up with your real life, and underscore like it's a movie moment. Wow. And I'm curious, Brandon, just another question. It's actually for all of the panelists and everything, but how much did faith play in your survival, and just in terms of getting through what you went through? Because I've had a friend of mine who was on another friend of mine's podcast streaming kind of show, and this gentleman, David, and I can't remember David's last name, but he's a 13-year cancer survivor, and I have a friend here in Durham who's a stroke survivor, and he survived some other things too. But this 13-year, I think two-time cancer survivor talked about how faith got him through the crisis that he went through in terms of the cancers, but also he discovered that he was living his life purpose. That purpose has meant a lot to him, so he wants to go ahead and live his life purpose. And I think that cancer drove him to getting that understanding that he wanted to not leave this planet till after he had achieved his life purpose. So part of his message is encouraging us all to find our purpose in life. And that's part of what he does in his speaking. I think his last name, now I think about it, is David Gardell. I think Gardell is the last name. But he's a motivational speaker, and he was even doing that and acting and other stuff before he had this second time of being cancer and just going through the survival of cancer. So I would love to hear from each of our guests
as to how much you feel that you're living your purpose and how much faith and purpose are an important part of what you do. So I'll start with you, Brandon, and then I'll go to Paul and come back to Patrice and then get to Keenan as well. So as we wind down, so we still got about another 10 to 15 minutes. But Brandon, how much has that meant to you, the journey of faith and discovering your purpose?
Yeah, it's I guess again, kind of growing up in a music house, I always knew I had such a love, love and passion for music, and just but I feel like definitely maybe my priorities changed after kind of like getting that close to not being alive on earth with all my family and friends, and so it definitely it's made certain things matter more maybe or in a different way, and made other things maybe not matter as much as they did, and I guess and my faith is definitely just like and the purpose, I feel like it's even more kind of like motivation, because I like every morning I love getting up, and I love not knowing everything that's going to happen. I like having a general plan for, of course, I like to put time to use, and savor the time that each breath kind of brings. But, just I guess I'm always excited about the surprises, of course, that lie ahead. I lived up in New York City for 3 years, and just up there, so, you're just like, there's something about how I feel like everybody's everybody's, on the street kind of together. There's an inevitable kind of, when it's that densely of a populated sort of area, but I guess it just made for like a kind of a interesting contrast of a camaraderie maybe compared to growing up in a more spacious kind of, town like Nashville, and but it's cool. I just love how, everywhere you go, there's there's that universal language of music. Definitely kind of it's something you can always have a conversation with somebody about, and or more than that. You might even just I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I went off the.
No, you answered the question. No, you did good. You answered the question. No problem at all. Paul, what would you say about purpose and you discovering your purpose? Because it sounds to me like part of your purpose is trying to get a lot of us to get our purpose and our act together, just in terms of the carbon footprint. So it seems to me like you have discovered part of your purpose, but I was just wondering, when did you feel that you discovered that purpose, and do you still think that it's a journey that you're on a regular basis? And if you would, as we're winding down the show, if you would give folks the way that they can get the book and the contact for the book and things of that nature in your answer, I'd appreciate that as well.
Okay. My book is going to be on my website at permies.com/BWB for Better World Book. It's at Amazon and lots of other places too. I want to say that the first step to be able to find my purpose probably came a little bit with being able to be free of financial burden. So like when you have a family and you need to pay for the mortgage and things like that, you're doing everything from a sense of logic and needing to get things done. But when you get to the point where that's not a problem anymore, then let's say your true path starts to show up. I think it's true, like what you said that your friend teaches about finding your purpose. I do think that when you stumble upon it and find it, then there is something about it that really fills your soul. I do have to say that trying to get people to do what I want them to do is not really what I want. What I really want is for people to understand the things that I'm talking about. If I could have that, I would want that 100 times more. And then they make their own choices. They follow their own path. And I hope that I was persuasive. As far as a spiritual element, I'm going to say that yes, I feel that there is a strong element. I feel that as coming at all of this as from the perspective of being a gardener, I feel like what I do now is I try to romance nature, and that the act of gardening is romancing nature, and maybe that is what I was built to do. I think that there might be a lot of people that were built to do that. As Patrice was talking about growing the herbs, which I just found really funny, considering peaches and herb connection, and it's like but I was kind of thinking like, and what I wanted to jump in and say, how did you feel doing that? And it's like, if you didn't have any other obligations in all the rest of your life, would you want to do more of it? And I'm going to pretend the answer is yes, I would, just because, of course, that's what I would do. But there you go. That's my answer. I'm going to stop there.
All right, sounds good. Keenan, what do you think you found your purpose? And if you'll tell people about Reimagining Science and where they can find that website as well in your answer as well. So definitely, and I agree with what Paul said about the whole thing about gardening in nature, because that's actually what I was going to say earlier. I would argue that that's probably the other thing along with music that there's very few people can actually have a hatred of. I mean, you might not like a certain animal, you might not like a certain part of nature, but I think as a general rule, we all either have some sort of respect for Mother Nature and definitely understand that Mother Nature is something that is part of our beauty of the world. So I would argue that the nature and music are probably two things that you will find very few people, if any, that have a utter hatred of it. Now, they might not like a tornado when it's getting ready to come right through the middle of their house, but they also have respect for Mother Nature when that happens. But definitely, I don't know that you can live life and not have some respect for Mother Nature.
Well, if you're paying attention, I would hope so. But I would actually argue that we've gone through an era where we were all about conquering nature, and there was a separation from feeling connected to nature. And I loved, Paul, what you were saying about hoping that this feeling of influencing people and it's a connection thing. Also, I do want to put in a plug. I grew up in New Mexico, so that big sky, that goes from horizon to horizon, I grew up under that big old dome myself, so I love that. I would say in terms of purpose, I do feel that I've probably always been purpose-driven. At 11, I read about a 14-year-old who died of leukemia, and I wanted to cure diseases. But the real test of purpose came, and it was a real eye of the needle for me, I was widowed when I was fairly young, and Pete and I had 2 children, and I was a faculty member. And I really had to look at the whole drive to live, purpose of life, what to do, right? What to do next. And my children were my purpose for living. But I do remember very clearly that it became very clear to me that the only true thing in the universe was love, that was really what it was all about. And I've had some different layers of that since then, because that isn't the only thing in and of itself. Like, love involves action. It involves community and connection, and it's a bit more complex than just love. But in terms of purpose, it's about while we're here, because we're not going to stay, right? The end point for all of us is we're not going to be here anymore. So clearly it's about what we do while we're here and the quality of that, which is why I'm loving that we're talking about gardening and music and those quality of life factors. So, yeah, and how you would find us, reimaginescience.org is our website. You can email me directly from that website on the contact link there, or even directly at kennan@reimaginescience.org. But either way is a really quick way to get something straight to me. And, I'm hoping that we are at a nexus for shifting to a whole new era on how we do everything, be it finances, housing, nature, animals. There's been a lot that's kind of in the subtext around the non-human world. That's another part that we really connect with and is a true vibration of how it is to be alive. I think we're at the cusp of a really big change. The situations are forcing that on us. Here we are.
Yeah, definitely. What advice, just really quickly before I get to Patrice, would you give to folks that have gone through that? Because I've had some friends that have also been widowed and are trying to go into that next step and trying to deal with continuing life after they have lost a spouse, whether that's a husband or a wife or a significant other of any sort. So as one that went through that, what kind of advice would you give to folks that have gone through that? Because that is something that I know some of our listeners have gone through. They might have gone through it, whether that was through somebody losing their life because of disease, because of murder, or because of just folks divorcing and leaving people going their separate ways. But what advice would you give to folks that are having to pick up and continue their life when they have that tragedy of one sort or another that interrupts their life?
Yeah. Well, first of all, my heart goes out to them. That kind of loss is very much like losing half of your body. It is a big thing. And I would say grab onto those friends who show up, because that's what gets you through. And there are some very meaningful relationships that show up in that cratered space where everything just has been in some ways destroyed. Whatever you had before, all the ins and outs of it are now suddenly gone in a moment. So it is a monumental change and a monumental lift. And for me, it was some very dear friends, especially my women friends, that showed up and were there for me. And that plus my purpose of needing to be there for my children, that's what got me through.
Appreciate that. Patrice, you've gone through some different hard times as well. What advice would you give? And also, if you would, tell folks how, as we wrap up the show, how they can find you as well and where they can see you or hear you perform and how they can hear your music. I mean, definitely where they can hear the old music of Peaches and Herb that you were part of, but also where they can hear this new amazing band that you have. So if you'll reiterate that and let folks know that and any advice that you may have for folks as well, instead of going through those kind of like separations and divisions and are having to continue their life, because you even talked about the fact that you had to continue your life as well as certain things happened within your life.
Yeah, well, I just really wanted to comment on the purpose, one's purpose, and I think that one's purpose to me is connected to one's passion. Whatever it is that your passion is, I believe is a person's purpose in life. And my passion has always been, and I know this might sound very cliche, but it's really true. I've always, as a child, wanted to be a philanthropist, to help people. That was always a dream of mine, to just make a difference in people's lives, to help them with financially, to help them with advice, to give them some kind of guidance, whatever it is that I could give, and not just, hey, here's $1 to buy a soda pop, but literally to help them to build, whether it is they wanted to build an empire or start a business or whatever it is that they wanted to do, but just to make a difference, even if it was with a song, just touching their heart and stuff. That was just always, that was always my passion, and I feel that because that is my passion, that is my purpose. That's why I am here, to spread that type of love, to do those things. Yeah. Was it another part of the? Was there another part that I missed? Your question?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to know. You had said it once before, but just really quickly, if you can tell folks one more time where they can find you, whether that's on Reverb Nation, whether that's on any of the platforms that they can find your current music, as well as if they wanted to go hear some of the older music. So for those that are not that familiar with Peaches and Herb, even though I don't know who that would be, but there might be somebody listening that's not that familiar.
A lot of the young folks, they've never heard Peaches and who? But my music is on all music platforms. Amazon, Spotify, I mean, you name it. It's on all of the music platforms that are out there. And my band, Patrice and the Show, you can find us at www.patriceandtheshow.com. That's our website. And, of course, Patrice Hawthorne, that's my name. I'm all over social media, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Yeah, so that's how you can find me.
I appreciate all of y'all being on. Hope that some of you will come back, or actually all of you will come back on in the not too distant future and continue the conversation and everything. But I definitely appreciated y'all all being on the show. Like I forgot who it was that said it, but we've definitely had a wide-ranging discussion, but touched on some very important issues. And glad that all of you were able to be on the show. And I hope that you will rejoin us in the not too distant future and make a return engagement with us, because we do love having return guests when it's all possible. So definitely hope that we can get you back on, and hopefully as the economy opens up and the world opens up, maybe we can even create some opportunities where we can actually see each other in physical space and not just in the virtual space, even though, of course, we'll continue this show for as long as me and Dean can keep it running. And we've already gone, what is this, Dean, our 5th year or our 6th year? So we've gone a number of years and are continuing this thing. So I don't know about Dean, but I'm good with us going for another 10 or 16 or 20 years, as long as I'm able to breathe and able to talk and able to have the conversations. I don't know if, Dean, you all right with that? If we manage to go another 10 or 15 years, or you going to cut me off after 10?
I don't know, bro. We're going to have to see where we go with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we got to see where we go with it. I understand, definitely. But so far, things are going well. We'll continue these great conversations and things of that nature. Dean always has a saying that he gives at the end, so I'm going to let Dean close us out with that saying, and also talk about the different platforms that folks can hear us on. I have a friend of mine who is an Indian American, as in from the country of India. I'm not sure. I think he's second generation. He's running for office for state treasurer. I was hoping he was going to join us today, but he was working on some stuff with the Biden campaign, so we pushed him back to the 27th. So he will be joining us to talk about his run for state office here in North Carolina as the Democrat running for the treasurer, the state treasurer. So definitely should be interested in hearing him talk about that background of being in corporate America, being of Indian American descent, and also being involved in the political spectrum. So he will be on the 27th. Still trying to get our guests together for the 20th, so don't know that I have anybody per se in mind, but, I'll find somebody before the 20th. And then, of course, we've got our variety of shows, including the Minority Reports, and I see that Dean has already put those on there. And we did our earlier podcast, which is the streaming podcast that I do on IBM TV, and then we pick it up on this platform, and I see that Dean has already put it on the calendar for the 18th, which is this coming Saturday. So this Saturday, it will be airing at 1 p.m., and that will be my discussion with Stella Adams, a longtime advocate and activist and housing rights person, as well as Sarah Fatima, who is a Middle Eastern from Iran, second-generation comedian. That's right, her folks came from the country of Iran, and I think she's been here definitely all of her adult life, young lady of about 27. I'm not sure if she moved here as a baby or not. I'll have to touch base with her on Twitter and clarify that, but I do know that she's been here pretty much all of her adult life, if not the entire adult life, and is a stand-up comedian out of L.A., but she spent a part of her life in Ohio as well. So she's definitely got all kinds of culture shock, and she talked about that, having both the Middle Eastern roots as well as the roots in Ohio and the roots in Los Angeles. One of the things that I think Keenan will get a kick out of and everything was that Stella put it, and she acknowledged it, that a lot of times Middle Eastern people, because of cultural situations consider themselves, and I think the census even considers themselves as white, but she is learning very quickly that the rest of society doesn't necessarily think that she's white. So they see that Middle Eastern, she might be as light as she wants to be, but then again, so am I, but they do not see her as white. They see her as a person of color, and she is learning about that even in her own comedy and her own life. So part of that is what we discussed that you can hear on the conversation if you tune in on the 18th on this platform. So, Dean, tell us a little bit more about the platform, some of our other shows, and your favorite saying to close us out both on this show and that other show that you're part of, which is the Let's Talk About It show. But, you know, you got that favorite saying that I love and I know they love as well.
Well, you know what? First of all, we want to thank all of our guests again for being with us tonight. It's Straight Talk with Dean and Mark, y'all, Monday nights, 7 p.m., right here, Eastern Standard Time, Blog Talk Radio. Don't forget our replay tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Skyhawk Radio Network. And if you miss those, we have replays on Radio Public, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, Stitcher, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, Castbox, Podfollow, and right here on Blog Talk Radio. Now, like I always say, when you walk outside your front door, showtime in the world is your stage. Just make sure that people are not watching the rehearsal. With that being said, it's the six-man Dean Geronimo signing off. Have an outstanding week. We see y'all in 7 days. Keep it locked right here to the Level Podcast Radio.
Yep, and we'll definitely see them in 7 days, and the Level Podcast Network is what we're all about. And I just wanted to remind Dean, because I think that he's redesigned it, but we're going to try to put it out there in different platforms in different ways. Who knows? Maybe we'll put it on the back of some business cards. But we now also have a QDR code, so you can follow us off of that QDR code, and a Bitly as well. So as, we try to develop the own social media and grow on a regular basis, we have now also added that as ways that we are growing. So we now have our own QDR code and our own Bitly, so we are continuing that growth process as well.
Indeed. Keep it locked right here, y'all.
Sounds good. Appreciate y'all, and we'll see you next week.